Hello students, welcome again. In our previous video lecture, we discussed T.S. Eliot as one of the founding pillars of new criticism. In the same manner, I.A. Richards has been considered as one of the founding pillars of new criticism during the 20th century. His full name is Ivor Armstrong Richards. He was born in 1893 and died in 1979. He has been considered, as an important critic. Why? Because he influenced many new critics of America with his critical outputs. Mainly, he has been, known for his three works: The Principles of Literary Criticism, published in 1924, The Practical Criticism, published in 1929, and The Philosophy of Rhetoric, published in 1936. He has expounded and propounded new critical theories during the first half of the 20th century, by which hundreds of other critics of modern world and post-modern world have been influenced. George Watson, an important critic of English literature, has rightly said that Richards' claim to have pioneered Anglo-American new criticism of the 30s and 40s is just unassailable. Unassailable means, no one can surpass his criticism. George Watson wants to say that I.A. Richards is the pioneer of Anglo-American new criticism, and no one else has surpassed him so far till the 20th century, 21st century. I.A. Richards is known for his essay, Four Kinds of Meaning. In today's video lecture, we want to discuss this essay, Four Kinds of Meaning. The discussion of meaning has been very old, since time immemorial. Critics and scholars have been discussing about how the meaning is derived, how the meaning comes. So I.A. Richards has written this essay, Four Kinds of Meaning, which you find in his book Practical Criticism, which was published in 1929. Many critics have discussed this issue. Like, say, for example, during the 14th century, Dante, who was an Italian scholar, poet and critic, he also discussed how the meaning is derived from poetry, and he said that there are mainly four kinds of meaning: literal meaning, historical meaning, allegorical meaning, and analogical meaning. So Dante during the 14th century discussed this issue. In the same manner, during the 20th century, there were some other critics like T.S. Eliot. Eliot also discussed about how the meaning comes from poetry. He said that the fusion of thought and emotion, fusion means a mixture of thought and emotion, gives birth to meaning in poetry. In the same manner, another new critic of the 20th century, Ransom, he discussed about the feeling and idea as the parents of meaning. He said that meaning comes from the feeling which is presented by the poet and the idea which is found in poetry. So when feeling and idea come together, they give birth to meaning. In the same manner, again during the 20th century, there was another critic, Alan Tate. He said that the production of tension, when extension and intention come together, they fused together, it gives birth to tension, and that tension gives birth to meaning. In my next video lecture, I am going to explain I am going to explain Alan Tate's concept of tension, extension and intention. But so different critics like Dante, Alan Tate, Ransom, T.S. Eliot, all different critics have discussed about how the meaning comes from poetry. In the same manner, I.A. Richards is also concerned with this idea of how the meaning comes from poetry, and he has written this essay, Four Kinds of Meaning. He said that the meaning, he agrees that there are some readers who have natural ability to acquire meaning, but they are not always the same kind of readers. There are some other readers who they try too much, but they fail to acquire the real meaning of the poem, or the real meaning which the poet wants to convey to the readers. So there are two types of readers: the readers who have natural ability to acquire the meaning. There are very few such readers, and there are some other readers who find it very difficult to attain the real core meaning of the poetry. He says that in all types of literature there are several meanings at the same time which come in our mind. So which meaning is more important, we don't know. The writer displays all these different meanings consciously or sometimes unconsciously. Okay, Richards compares the writer with a juggler. Okay, and he says that whether we know or intend it or not, we are all jugglers. When we converse, when we talk, or when we use language in communication, we behave as jugglers, because we give birth to so many different meanings. Okay, keeping the billiard ball in the air while we balance the cue on our nose. So meaning, one sentence can have hundreds of meanings. Okay, now which meaning is important, how to decide, that has been the topic of discussion. According to Richards, the way of speaking or the way of writing always conveys more than one meaning, a blend of several meanings. Okay, language as it is used in poetry has not one but several tasks to perform simultaneously. So Richards proceeds on to describe different functions or different levels of meanings which impart poetry a holistic structure. Okay, he says that meaning actually depends on four aspects. Which are these four aspects? They are sense, feeling, tone and intention. Okay, say for example, when I use one sentence in my poetry, if I write some lines in my poetry, meaning, there are hundreds of meanings, right? Different readers receive different meanings. So that meaning comes from where, and it depends on what? Richards says that meaning depends on these four aspects: sense, feeling, tone and intention. Now what is sense? Richards says that we speak to say something, and when we listen we expect something to be said. That is sense. Okay, so he wants to say that sense means something, kind of subject matter. Okay, anyone who talks about something, when he uses language, there is a subject matter which is communicated to the readers or to the listeners. That subject matter is known as sense. Okay, no communication is without a sense, without a subject matter. So meaning lies in the subject matter, number one. Number two is feeling. Meaning also depends on feeling. Feeling is what? It is an attitude towards it, some personal flavor or coloring of feeling. When the reader reads poetry, the reader reads that poetry with some particular attention, with particular feeling. That feeling also gives birth to meaning. Say for example, when I say a cup of tea, you have one feeling, but when I say a glass of wine, you have a negative feeling, right? So the meaning does not lie in the cup of tea, or the meaning does not lie in a glass of wine. The meaning is derived from within the mind of the reader. How the reader responds to that particular object, that particular subject matter, that is also important. Okay, so something which is good to you may not be good to others. That is your personal attitude or personal feeling. You have different feelings within your heart: desire, pleasure, displeasure, pity, sympathy, admiration, contempt, and so on. Okay, all these things which is there stored in your heart, they also decide how you derive a meaning from poetry. So reader's response to a subject matter, that is also important while attaining the meaning from poetry. Number 3 is tone. By tone, I.A. Richards means to say about the writer's attitude to the readers. Okay, as I told you, how the readers take it, that is important. In the same manner, how the writers present it, that is the writer's attitude, is known as tone. So that tone is also important, critical in conveying the meaning of poetry. There is an intimate relationship between the author and the reader, and this relationship is developed by the writer with his own attitude, which is known as tone. How the writer approaches his subject matter, that gives birth to meaning. And the fourth one is intention. Intention means, the writer's aim, the ultimate aim, what he wants to convey. His ultimate aim also is important in conveying the meanings to the reader. Now, the writer does it consciously sometimes, or sometimes unconsciously, right? So, these are the 4 aspects, okay, on which the meaning depends: sense, feeling, tone, and intention. Sense means what? Sense means the subject matter. Feeling means what? The reader's attitude towards poetry. Tone means what? The writer's attitude to his poetry. And intention, the writer's aim while writing that poetry. So meaning depends on all these 4 levels. Now these all 4 levels, have they are sometimes one of them is emphasized more than others, right? Say for example, like in political speech, tone is important, right? Tone is important. In scientific treatise, when a scientist is writing an article, in that treatise, subject matter is more important. When a poet is writing poetry, then feeling and tone are important. So there are different kinds of discourses, there are different kinds of writings. In all different kinds of writings, one or the other is major out of these 4. Sometimes sense is most important, like in scientific treatise, sometimes tone is important, say in political speeches. Sometimes tone and feeling are more important than other two in poetry and literature. Okay. Moreover, in his essay Four Kinds of Meaning, I.A. Richards has also discussed about the functions of language. See, in literature, the authors use language. Okay, in our day-to-day conversation, we also use language, and this language has primarily two functions: referential function and emotive function. In poetry, emotive function plays major role. Why? Because poetry mostly appeals our emotions. It appeals and arouses the reader's emotions, and multiple readings are very important to acquire the poetic meaning. Sometimes it so happens that when we read one poetry once, we get one meaning, but we read the same poetry second time, we get another meaning. We read the same poetry third time, we get yet another meaning. So there are as many meanings, you can say multiple meanings stored in one poetry, which we receive after every new reading. So multiple readings are important in order to achieve the real meaning which was intended by the author. Moreover, Richard said that meaning also depends on the words and the context in which the words are used. Okay, he says that Richard says that words in poetry have emotive value and figurative language is used by the poets. Different poets use the same words in different contexts, in different situations, and in different situations the same words give different meanings. Okay, words are what? Words are actually the signs. They are the symbols which give their full meaning in one particular context. Okay, the literary critic. What is the job of a literary critic? According to I.A. Richards, the critic's job is to understand and expand that context within which the words are used by the author, okay, in that poetry. So that when the critic expands the whole context, it becomes understandable and easier for the common reader to enjoy the full value of that poetry. Moreover, according to I.A. Richards, meaning also depends on rhyme and meter. Okay, he says that meaning of the words is determined by rhyme and meter. Rhyme comes from where? Rhyme comes from the repetition of particular sounds. Okay, different sounds give birth to rhyme. Rhyme is very important in poetry, and in the same manner meter is also important. Both rhyme and meter, they are organic and integral part, important part of a poem, because they both determine the meaning of the words which are used by the poet. Metaphors, sometimes some figures of speech used by the poet, also give spatial or different meanings to the same words. So, use of figures of speech, use of meter and rhyme, words used in different contexts, all these come together to bring about the meaning in poetry. So now let's conclude the whole discussion by saying that Richards has mainly presented four levels of meaning. Which are these four levels? Sense, feeling, tone and intention. Sense means the subject matter. Feeling means the reader's attitude, reader's approach towards poetry. Tone means the writer's attitude or writer's approach to his poetry, and intention. Intention means the ultimate aim of the poet. Okay, so meaning depends on this four. Moreover, meaning also depends on how the words are used in different contexts. Okay, and not only this, sometimes meter and rhyme and use of figures of speech also determine the ultimate meaning, the holistic meaning of poetry. So this is how I.A. Richards has discussed the meanings of how meaning comes from poetry in his essay Four Kinds of Meaning. In short, let's conclude that I.A. Richards has been, along with T.S. Eliot, has been considered as the founding father of new criticism, because his criticism, his critical documents and writings are highly factual, scientific and complete in themselves. So here we come to the end of this discussion. If you have any doubts or questions, do write to me in the comment section of this channel, and do share this video among your friends and classmates. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.